My wife's mom told everyone I was mentally unstable and dangerous to myself. We all saw you talking to yourself. She smirked at Christmas. I calmly replied, practicing a speech for the conference where I was the keynote speaker. Her smile disappeared when my wife added, and he got a standing ovation. We all saw you talking to yourself. She smirked across the Christmas table, practicing a speech for the conference where I was the keynote speaker. I replied, keeping my voice level. My wife, without missing a beat, added, and he got a standing ovation. The room went quiet. Her mother's smug look vanished. That's how it started. Just one moment, one comment, but it unraveled years of tension and quietly changed everything. Now I'm trying to figure out what to do with the fallout. We all come from different families, but Helena's was on another level. I knew from the start that her mother, Yvette, was sharp-tongued and judgmental. I saw the way she would size up a room, scanning for weakness like she was always preparing to strike. I thought it was just her way. Helena used to brush it off with phrases like, "That's just how she is," or "She means well, it's just old-school upbringing." And for a long time, I believed that. I kept my distance, smiled when I had to, changed the topic when Yvette started prodding into our finances, my career, or when we might give her a grandchild. It was easier than confrontation. I thought I was being mature, letting it go. Things got harder when I hit a rough stretch a few years ago. I had just left a long-term job after a major project tanked. It wasn't directly my fault, but I had taken responsibility. It burned me out, left me doubting myself. At the same time, Helena and I were struggling to get pregnant. We had a miscarriage. I watched my wife sob on the bathroom floor, and I felt like I had to stay strong for both of us. But inside, I was cracking. I had always been quiet, a little withdrawn, more of a listener than a talker. But back then, I got even quieter. I started therapy. My therapist recommended exercises, visualization, rehearsing positive self-talk. I started practicing speeches out loud, sometimes motivational, sometimes technical talks for the IT conferences I was applying to. It helped. It gave me a sense of control, of purpose. I'd go into the garage, pace back and forth, and speak. Nothing dramatic, no delusions. Just a guy trying to find his confidence again. One weekend, while Helena's mom was visiting, she caught a glimpse of that. I didn't even know it happened until weeks later, when I noticed Helena acting distant after a call with her sister. Then came the comments from her cousins. Little things at first. Jokes. Odd looks. That's when Helena told me the truth. Yvette had told the entire extended family that I was mentally unwell, that she was concerned for Helena's safety, that I was talking to myself for hours in the garage and might be a danger to myself. She made it sound like I was unraveling, dangerous, unstable. I was furious, but more than that, I was hurt. She didn't ask me what I was doing. She didn't speak to me about it directly. She saw something she didn't understand and spun a narrative, one that cast me as a threat, one that made Helena look like a victim. Helena was livid when she found out. She tried to defend me to her family, but the damage had been done. We started pulling away, skipping family events. It became a slow, painful drift. Then came that Christmas in Boise. We hadn't been back in over a year. Helena wanted to give her mom one more chance, partly for closure, partly for our own sanity. I agreed on the condition that if things got uncomfortable, we'd leave. No arguments. From the moment we walked in, I felt it. The tension. Yvette acted like nothing had happened, but everyone else. They watched me, like I might suddenly snap. Priya avoided me. Her husband barely said 2 words. There were whispers behind closed doors, glances exchanged when I stepped into a room. I kept my head down. I tried to make it through the weekend. Then, during Christmas dinner, Yvette decided to bring it up. Casually, like it was a joke, like she hadn't tried to paint me as dangerous. "We all saw you talking to yourself," she said, her voice light, but laced with something meaner. "I just hope everything's okay now." I looked at her. The room fell silent. I could feel everyone watching, waiting. I said, calmly, I was rehearsing a speech. For a conference. I was the keynote speaker. Yvette's eyes narrowed, the smirk freezing. Then Helena spoke, and he got a standing ovation. The silence stretched. No one dared say anything. Even Priya looked down at her plate. I could hear the clink of a fork being set down. It was one of those moments where the air changed, where you can almost hear the balance of power shifting. Yvette didn't respond. She sipped her wine, her hand trembling just slightly. After dinner, Helena and I packed our things. We left early the next morning. She didn't speak much on the drive back to the hotel. Neither did I. We didn't need to. And now, things are different. Helena's family doesn't reach out as much. A few have texted apologies, nothing direct, nothing that fully acknowledges what happened. Yvette sent a long email that I haven't replied to. She says she was misunderstood, that she only wanted what's best. But how do you misinterpret someone rehearsing in a garage as a sign that they're dangerous? How do you justify spreading rumors about someone who is quietly rebuilding himself? I still go to therapy. I still talk to myself sometimes. Not because I'm unstable, but because it helps. It grounds me. The speech I gave, it was on resilience. on how tech professionals deal with burnout and rebuild after failure. It was personal. I shared parts of my journey. And yeah, I got a standing ovation. People lined up to talk afterward. I've since been invited to 2 more events. Helena stood in the back of that room, smiling. She knew. She saw the work it took to get there. But Yvette never did. And maybe she never will. I don't know what to do with that. Part of me wants to cut her off entirely. Another part wonders if I owe it to Helena or our future daughter to at least try to rebuild something. Maybe not trust, but a truce. We're expecting now, due in August. And that adds a whole other layer to this. Do we let Yvette be part of this child's life? Can we, knowing what she did? Helena and I didn't talk about it much for a while. Christmas dinner. Yvette's comment. The way her words landed like a slap across a dinner table full of people who didn't really know me, but were ready to believe the worst. It just sort of hung in the air between us after we left. We stayed in a hotel that night. Not because we had to, but because neither of us could bear waking up under Yvette's roof. Helena lay on her side of the bed staring at the ceiling, her hand resting on her stomach, barely showing, but just enough to remind us that this year would be different. Next Christmas would be different. I should have shut it down earlier, she whispered. When she started all this. I didn't say anything right away. I wasn't angry with Helena. She'd been caught in the middle of a family who thrived on subtle power plays and guilt. But the fact that she said it at all told me how much she'd been thinking about it too. She didn't want to understand, I finally said. Even if you had shut it down, she would have found a way to spin it. Helena turned her face toward me, eyes glassy. I think I needed to hear her say it out loud. I needed to know how far she was willing to go. In the weeks that followed, we kept to ourselves. Helena didn't reply to her mom's emails. She sent a thank you text for a baby onesie Yvette mailed to us in January, but nothing more than that. Meanwhile, I threw myself into work again. I had 3 speaking engagements lined up, each one bigger than the last. Something had shifted in me after that conference. Maybe it was the applause. Maybe it was the realization that the narrative Yvette tried to push didn't define me. Whatever it was, I felt more rooted in myself than I had in years. I wasn't the guy muttering nonsense to himself in the garage. I was the guy building himself back up, brick by brick. And slowly, I stopped caring what her family thought of me. Still, it stung to know how quickly people were willing to believe the worst. That if someone loud enough says something often enough, no matter how wrong, they'll find ears willing to nod along. I wasn't mad that they were confused. I was mad that not one of them came to me directly to ask if I was okay. Except for Helena's cousin Mina. She reached out a couple weeks after Christmas, texted Helena first, then called me. Said she wanted to apologize for how things went down, that she hadn't really believed Yvette, but didn't know what to say at the moment. I told her I appreciated it. I wasn't looking for groveling, just someone to acknowledge how damaging it could have been. I always thought she was a little intense, Mina said. But I didn't realize how manipulative she could be until I saw the way she looked when you answered her. I remembered that moment clearly. The smirk she had. The smug confidence that she'd just dropped a clever little explosive in front of a captive audience. And the way her face changed when I didn't crumble, when Helena backed me up. That wasn't the look of someone worried about her daughter. That was the look of someone losing control. As Helena's pregnancy progressed, we started talking more seriously about what kind of relationship, if any, we wanted our child to have with her family. Not just Yvette, but the whole family system that enabled her behavior. There were no easy answers. Helena's sister Priya reached out, too. Sent a long message trying to clear the air. She insisted that she'd never thought I was dangerous, that she was just confused, and repeating what she heard. She didn't apologize exactly, more like tried to neutralize things by claiming it was all one big misunderstanding. But it wasn't. It was a very deliberate campaign of whispers and assumptions, led by someone who needed to feel powerful and feared what she didn't understand. Yvette saw me struggling, didn't ask questions, and jumped straight to character assassination. And the people around her, people who had known me for years, didn't question it. Helena was firm. She said we weren't doing half apologies and vague hand-waving. If they want to be in our kid's life, she told me one night as we folded baby clothes, they're going to have to show up as better people. And my mom, she's going to have to change. Not pretend. Actually change. I asked her if she thought that was possible. Helena stared down at the tiny socks in her lap. I don't know, she said. But I know what's not possible, letting her near our daughter if she's still the woman who tried to convince my whole family that you were dangerous. In early March, we had our baby shower. It was small, just a few friends and coworkers. My parents flew in from Michigan. Helena's aunt, Gloria, came too. She was the only one from Yvette's side who showed up, but she came with warmth, grace, and a quiet kind of apology wrapped in a homemade quilt. She didn't mention Yvette at all, but she said, I just want you both to know how proud I am of you for the way you carry yourselves, and how you love each other. Helena teared up. I nearly did too. It reminded me that not everyone tied to Yvette had to be part of her storm. Some people chose a different path, even if it meant going against the family script. A few nights later, we got another email from Yvette. The subject line was just, can we talk? Helena read it first. She didn't open it right away, just stared at it for a while. She finally clicked it open, but didn't read it out loud. After a minute, she turned her laptop toward me. I read it quietly. It was longer than the first one, less defensive, but still riddled with excuses. She said she had been worried and misunderstood the situation, that she didn't mean to hurt me or our relationship, that she missed Helena, that she wanted to be part of her granddaughter's life. And buried near the bottom, if I was wrong about what I saw, I'm sorry, but I was acting out of concern. I closed the laptop and let out a breath. Helena didn't say anything. The silence between us this time wasn't like the one after Christmas. This one wasn't about fear or shame. It was the weight of knowing what you have to do next, even if you're not ready to say it out loud. We haven't replied yet. There's a part of me that wants to forgive, not for her sake, but for mine. Because carrying the bitterness around every day, it gets heavy. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it sure as heck doesn't mean trusting someone who's never taken full responsibility. We're still talking through it. There's a lot we don't know yet. What we do know is that the little girl growing inside Helena will not grow up surrounded by whispered judgments or manipulation masked as concern. She'll grow up hearing the full truth, even the hard parts, even the parts that still hurt. The days following that email passed in a sort of limbo. Helena didn't bring it up again, and neither did I, not immediately. We were both busy enough preparing for the baby, attending appointments, and finalizing the nursery. There were car seats to install, bottles to sterilize, and midnight Amazon orders that probably weren't necessary, but gave us something to focus on besides the growing question between us. Do we reply? One evening, I came home late from a small tech panel I'd been invited to join. It wasn't anything fancy, just a local group of IT professionals sharing project, post-mortems, and recovery stories. A couple attendees approached me afterward and thanked me for keeping it real during my talk. It was strange, but in a good way, to be seen clearly by people I barely knew. When I got home, Helena was already in bed, propped up on pillows with her Kindle on her lap, but the glow from the screen had that idle look. She wasn't reading. She wrote again. Helena said without looking at me. I froze halfway through taking off my jacket. Yvette. She nodded. Shorter this time. Just said, please. I don't want to be shut out. I walked over and sat beside her. Her hand automatically found mine, resting on the curve of her belly. I keep trying to figure out if I'm angry or just tired, she said softly. Maybe both. I didn't answer right away. I knew how deeply complicated it was for her. Yvette wasn't just my antagonist in this story. She was her mother, her childhood, her shame and loyalty, all tangled up in pearls and harsh judgments disguised as family concern. I think it's okay to feel both, I said finally. We sat in silence a bit longer. Then she closed the Kindle and looked at me. She'll want to be there when the baby's born. I nodded. She probably will. Helena leaned her head back and sighed. But that's not her right. It wasn't a question. It was a decision being born. A few days later, we made a choice, not a dramatic one, not some final door slam, but a boundary. We decided not to reply to Yvette's emails, not yet. Instead, Helena sent a short message to her sister and her cousin Mina, saying that we were focusing on the birth and wouldn't be hosting visitors until after the baby arrived, and we felt ready. It was diplomatic, polite, and intentional. Of course, that didn't stop the reactions. Priya replied almost instantly, passive-aggressive as ever. I hope you're not cutting off Mom completely. She's trying. She's just old-fashioned. Helena read it, rolled her eyes, and didn't respond. Mina, on the other hand, sent a much kinder reply. Totally understand. I know this isn't easy, but I support whatever you both need to feel safe and settled. Let me know if you ever need anything. It was the kind of reply that feels like a hand being held out across a chasm. And even though the chasm was still wide, the gesture mattered. As the due date got closer, my focus shifted completely. I read every baby prep guide I could get my hands on. I stocked the fridge, set up the bassinet, installed a white noise machine that Helena called overkill, but secretly liked. And then, at 2:17 a.m. on a quiet Thursday in May, Helena shook me awake. I think my water broke. The next 12 hours were a blur. Pain, panic, pacing hospital hallways. Helena squeezed my hand so hard at one point I thought my knuckles cracked. But she was incredible, strong, focused, fierce. And at 2:51 p.m., Isla was born. 6 pounds, 10 ounces of tiny, screaming, perfect life. Helena cried. I cried. We held her and whispered all the things we'd wanted to say for months. Promises, hopes, apologies for things she'd never need to carry. We didn't take any calls. Didn't answer the flood of texts from extended family. We turned our phones off for 2 full days. It was just us. And it was perfect. When we finally turned our phones back on, there were dozens of missed messages. Yvette had emailed again. Then Helena's phone had a missed call from an Idaho number. 2 voicemails. No actual emergency. Just more of Yvette's insistent tone. Her final voicemail ended with a strained, I just don't understand why I'm being punished. Punished. As if this were about vengeance. as if she wasn't still painting herself as the victim of something we had created. Helena didn't respond. Neither did I. Instead, we took Isla home, showed her the nursery, played soft music in the background, and danced with her across the living room. The first few nights were chaos, but the good kind. The messy, beautiful kind. The kind that made everything that came before feel small. Still, the noise from Yvette's direction never stopped. A week later, she sent a card. No return address. Just Grandma Yvette in loopy handwriting. Inside was a photo of Helena as a baby and a note that said, "Don't let her grow up not knowing her grandmother." That's all I ask. It wasn't signed love. It wasn't even signed sincerely. Just a name. Helena read it, folded it carefully, and placed it in a drawer. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally, she whispered, "I don't think she knows what love is. I think she just knows control." And I couldn't argue. Now it's been nearly 6 weeks since Isla was born. We haven't visited Boise. We don't plan to. Some days I feel at peace with that. Other days, it still gnaws at me the injustice of it. That this woman could try to hamper me, weaponize her voice, and then reframe it all as concern when confronted. That she might get away with it, in the eyes of some family, simply because we've chosen not to yell back. But maybe that's the hardest part about choosing a different path. You don't get the satisfaction of drama. You just get a quiet distance. Space. A chance to protect something new and vulnerable from the patterns you worked so hard to escape. Helena and I are still figuring out how to move forward. Not just with Yvette, but with all of it. What do you do when someone's words don't bruise your skin, but bruise your place in a family? When their accusations don't just hurt, they stain. I know this isn't over. Not yet. There's still a baby girl whose future is being written. And 2 parents trying to make sure that it doesn't start with inherited guilt, secrets, or toxic apologies wrapped in lace. We're not closing the door, but we're not letting anyone else walk through it without earning the right. The following weeks settled into something that resembled routine, at least. As much as routine can exist when you're living in 3-hour chunks between feedings, diaper changes, and desperately trying to catch sleep whenever the baby sleeps. Isla had colic early on, which meant evenings were long stretches of bouncing and swaying and humming every lullaby we knew. Helena wore deep circles under her eyes, and my back aches more than I wanted to admit. But somehow, none of it felt burdensome. It was exhausting, yes, but it was the kind of tiredness that came with a strange clarity. Like every time I looked at my daughter's face, I remembered exactly why we made the decisions we did. There were no further emails from Yvette that month. For a moment, it felt like maybe the storm had passed, that maybe she'd taken the silence for what it was, an answer. But then Helena's phone lit up with a new message from Priya. "Just a heads up. Mom is telling people you're keeping Isla from her on purpose. That Brennan turned you against your own family." There it was again. The narrative. Not a cry for understanding or an honest attempt at healing, but a carefully designed story that positioned her as the injured party. Again, I was the problem. Again, she was the one being victimized. Helena sat on the couch reading the message, holding Isla against her chest as she dozed off after a feeding. I watched her jaw tighten, lips pressed into a flat line. "She doesn't even care if it's true," she said finally. "She just wants someone to blame. She's scared of losing control," I said. "And blaming me is easier than admitting she's the reason you've pulled away." Helena nodded, brushing Isla's soft hair back from her forehead. "You'd think becoming a grandmother would bring something out in her, some kind of warmth, some reflection," she said quietly. "But it's just the same as always. She wants access, no connection. She wants to be seen as loving, but not actually be loving." And that was the core of it. Yvette didn't want reconciliation. She wanted optics. She wanted people to see her as the kind of mother who was being wrongfully denied her grandchild, not the one who tried to ruin her son-in-law's reputation out of pride and ignorance. I tried to stay away from Helena's extended family drama, but it crept in through side doors, Instagram comments, random texts, birthday card notes. Mina texted again. She said Yvette had cornered her at a family brunch and asked if she'd spoken to Helena about letting bygones be bygones. "She's making this into a generational tragedy," Mina wrote. Like she's some Shakespearean matriarch being cast out by her ungrateful children. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. The melodrama would have been funny if it weren't so familiar. I started noticing a pattern. Yvette's behavior had less to do with pain and more to do with performance. Everything she did, every message she sent, every story she spun to the extended family, was about shaping the narrative to keep herself at the center of the stage. Helena saw it too, and it hurt her in ways I couldn't always reach. She tried to pretend it didn't, but I saw the way she lingered at her phone when new family group messages popped up. I saw how her voice dropped just slightly when someone mentioned a cousin's baby shower or a birthday party we weren't invited to. Even when you choose distance, it doesn't mean you don't feel the weight of it. One Saturday afternoon, about 2 months after Isla was born, we got a knock at the door. I opened it to find a courier holding a box no return label. Inside was a package from Yvette. A pale pink cardigan, hand-knit. A silver baby rattle. A framed photo of Helena as a baby with a sticky note attached that read, "Isla looks just like you did." No note. No apology. Just carefully chosen objects, probably meant to tug at heartstrings and invite sympathy. Helena looked at everything silently. She didn't touch the cardigan. She didn't smile at the photo. "She still thinks this is a campaign," she said. "Like if she sends the right gift, we'll forget everything that came before." I asked her what she wanted to do with it. She said, "Box it back up. Put it in the attic. If Isla ever wants to know who her grandmother is, we'll decide together how to tell her. But I'm not giving her these things and pretending they came from love." So I did. I packed the items back into the box, labeled it simply, "Yvette, not given." And I placed it on a shelf next to other things we were storing: old college yearbooks, maternity clothes, a box of letters from our early days of dating. But that box, that one felt heavier than the rest. In therapy, I talked a lot about anger. Not the explosive kind, the quiet, unshakable kind. The anger that comes when someone paints you into a role you never agreed to play and refuses to rewrite the script even after you've spoken your truth. My therapist asked me once what I wanted from Yvette. At first, I said, "I just want her to admit she was wrong." But after a moment, I said, "No, that's not it. I want her to understand she was wrong." And then I laughed. Because that was the part one knew might never happen. Understanding requires self-reflection. It requires admitting you caused harm. It requires humility. And I'd never seen Yvette show a single flicker of that in all the years I'd known her. Helena started writing things down at night. Not journaling, more like letters. Not to anyone in particular, and not for mailing. But they were raw, honest, sometimes heartbreaking. One night, she handed me a few pages. It was a letter to Isla. She wrote about how much she wanted her, how hard it was to become her mom, how proud she was of the family we were building. And in one section, she wrote, "I want you to grow up knowing that boundaries aren't unkind. That saying no isn't the same as shutting people out. Your dad and I didn't choose distance out of spite, we chose it out of love. To protect you, to protect us, to create a space where you could grow without the weight of inherited manipulation." I read it twice. I didn't say anything for a long time. Because what could I say? She had captured everything I'd been trying to understand about this situation. Every word Yvette had twisted. Every silence we had chosen. Every hard decision that had no perfect answer. Only the one that hurt less. Another month passed. Isla began to smile, real, gummy smiles that melted stress like butter on a warm skillet. She started recognizing our faces, cooing when she saw us enter the room. And somehow, the joy in those moments made the weight of everything else feel less sharp. But even joy doesn't erase injustice. Helena and I still hadn't decided what to do with Yvette. The emails had stopped. The packages had stopped. For a while, the silence from her side almost felt eerie. But then, one day, the silence broke, and not in a way either of us expected. It came through Helena's work inbox. Yvette had emailed the clinic where Helena worked. She phrased it as a concerned inquiry about Helena's mental state postpartum. Claimed Helena had been emotionally erratic, that I was controlling, and suggested it might be unsafe for her to return to patient care until she had stabilized. She signed it with her full name, credentials, and even CC'd Helena's clinic director. Helena called me the moment she saw it. I was changing Isla's diaper when the phone rang, and I could hear her shaking through the receiver. "She sent this to my work, Brennan. She actually tried to interfere with my job." I stopped what I was doing. I felt my stomach go cold. This wasn't just gossip now. This wasn't whispered at family gatherings. Yvette had crossed a line that threatened my wife's livelihood and, by extension, our family's security. "She doesn't know how else to get control," I said, gripping the edge of the counter. "So she's escalating." Helena filed a formal report with HR. Her director, to their credit, saw right through it and called it what it was: torment. They supported Helena completely, reassuring her that the message would be documented and disregarded. But the emotional damage was already done. That night, as we sat on the couch while Isla slept in the bassinet nearby, Helena looked over at me and said, "I'm done waiting for her to become someone she's not." "What do you want to do?" I asked. Her answer came fast. "I want to show her what it feels like to be exposed." We didn't retaliate in the way Yvette might have expected. No angry emails. No Facebook rants. No screaming phone calls. We planned something more measured, something precise. Something final. First, Helena wrote a letter. Not to Yvette, but to the rest of the family. Everyone who had watched the whole thing unfold in silence. Or worse, entertained the rumors. It was long, thoughtful, not bitter, but difficultly honest. She laid out everything: Yvette's original lie, the smear campaign, the manipulation, the Hampere attempt at work. She included receipts, literally. Screenshots of emails, voicemails, the package label, even the forwarded message to her boss. Then, she ended it like this: "If any of you still believe my husband is unstable or unsafe, after all the evidence to the contrary, I encourage you to remove yourselves from our lives." We will no longer entertain a version of this story that protects the person who has repeatedly tried to harm our family. If, however, you recognize what she did and are ready to stand up instead of staying silent, you are welcome to be part of Isla's life. But make no mistake, access to us is earned, not entitled. And Yvette has burned that bridge. We sent the email late on a Sunday night. By Monday morning, the responses began trickling in. Some were defensive. Priya wrote a short, stilted message. I didn't know it was that serious. I thought she was just concerned. Others were apologetic. Meena replied with, thank you for telling the full truth. I believe you. I'm here whenever you're ready. Two aunts reached out and said they were ashamed for staying quiet. One cousin asked if he could send something for Isla as a peace offering. But the one we waited for never came. Yvette didn't reply. She didn't defend herself. She didn't apologize. Nothing. Just silence. That silence was louder than anything she could have said. 2 weeks later, we got a letter from an attorney. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a legal complaint. It was a formal request from Yvette's lawyer to establish grandparent visitation rights under Idaho law. We brought it to our lawyer, who reviewed it and shook his head. She has no legal standing, he said. No relationship with the child. No history of care. You're fine. She's just trying to scare you. He told us we could send a cease and desist or simply ignore it. Helena looked at me and smiled for the first time in a long time when talking about her mother. Let's ignore it, she said. Let her spend money chasing the idea of control. And we did. In the months that followed, we quietly rebuilt everything. Helena returned to work with full support from her colleagues. I continued growing my public speaking circuit, sharing my journey through burnout, recovery, and toxic family dynamics with more confidence than I'd ever had before. We created a blog together, Boundary Built, writing about emotional manipulation, healthy boundaries, and choosing self-preservation over people-pleasing. It started small, but the readership grew. Messages came in from people who said the stories we shared gave them courage to speak up in their own lives. Yvette didn't get invited to Isla's first birthday. But you know who did? Meena, her husband. A few of Helena's cousins who had chosen truth over convenience. People who showed up with smiles, asked questions about Isla's interests, and laughed with us in the backyard over cupcakes and bubbles. Helena gave a short toast during the party. To those who chose to stay silent before, thank you for finding your voices now, she said. And to those who tried to rewrite our story, this is how we write it ourselves. The guests clapped, raising their plastic cups of lemonade. I looked down at Isla, sitting in my lap with frosting on her cheeks, and I realized something important. This wasn't revenge as Yvette might define it. It wasn't about destruction or humiliation. It was about removing her from the center of the story and watching what happens when truth is allowed to breathe. No more whispered narratives. No more performance. Just a quiet, joyful life that she couldn't touch anymore. That was the real win. That was the real freedom.